For decades, everyone's been asking the same question: who killed JonBenét Ramsey? But you know what? What if that's the wrong question entirely? In this explainer, we're not going to try to solve the crime. Instead, we're going to try to understand the mind behind the crime. We'll dig into the deep, unsettling contradictions in the evidence, not to point fingers, but to try and paint a portrait of a mind in absolute total crisis.
Okay, so let's just start with this idea. What if all the clues, when you really lay them out, don't tell the story of some criminal mastermind from the outside? What if, instead, they show us the panicked, chaotic, and frankly, illogical actions of someone on the inside trying desperately to cover up an unthinkable tragedy? That's the real question we're going to explore.
And this right here is the heart of the whole puzzle. The crime scene is just a total paradox. On one hand, you have absolute chaos and violence, but on the other, you have these moments of just bizarre, careful staging. A violent act, but then this tender gesture with a blanket. A frantic 911 call, but only after someone took the time to write a 2.5-page letter. These things don't just contradict each other, they're practically at war with one another. It feels like a mind at war with itself.
So let's start with maybe the biggest piece of psychological theater in the whole case: the ransom note. Seriously, this thing wasn't just a clue, it was a full-blown performance. The question is, who was the intended audience? I mean, just try to picture this for a second. You're a kidnapper. You're in a house where you could be discovered any minute. The clock is ticking. And you decide to what? Sit down and write a rambling 3-page letter? Using a notepad and a pen you found in the house? It's not just risky, it makes no sense. For a real criminal, the goal is speed. Get in, get out. This is the exact opposite of that.
And you can really see the absurdity when you break it down like this. A real ransom note is a tool. It's short, it's direct, it has one purpose: get the money. The Ramsey note, it's this theatrical production, it's full of movie quotes and weirdly specific yet confusing demands. Honestly, it doesn't read like a real criminal wrote it. It reads like what someone thinks a criminal would write. It's like they're playing a part.
And here's the thing, even John Ramsey himself pointed out how illogical it was. He recognized that if an intruder really wanted to frame the family, the last thing they do is hang around creating more evidence. Leaving a long note on their paper in their house, it actually makes the whole intruder story harder to believe, not easier. So this forces us to ask a really fundamental question. If this note wasn't about getting a ransom, what was it for? While all the evidence suggests its purpose wasn't to get money, it was to create a story. It was a piece of fiction, a performance designed to be a smokescreen for whatever really happened in that house. All right, now let's shift gears from performance to hard science, because our next big contradiction is a piece of biological evidence that just completely torpedoes the official story. Let's talk about the pineapple. So first, here's the timeline the Ramseys gave police. It's very clean, right? Very straightforward. They get home, John carries a sound asleep JonBenet upstairs to her bed, and that's the last they see of her. According to this version of events, that timeline is sealed. There's just no room for anything else to have happened. But the autopsy tells a totally different story. The coroner found undigested pineapple in her stomach. And that's huge because it means she must have eaten it very shortly before she died. This creates a brand new, conflicting timeline. It means she had to be awake with someone eating a snack during the exact hours her parents said she was fast asleep. That pineapple is like a biological clock, and it shatters the official narrative.
And here's where the paradox just gets deeper. There was a bowl of pineapple found on the kitchen table, but both John and Patsy insisted they didn't serve it to her, and that JonBenet was asleep the whole time anyway. So you have this piece of fruit that physically exists, but that their story has no explanation for.
So we have to ask the obvious question. Who was she with? Think about it. An intruder breaking into a house doesn't stop to make their victim a late-night snack. That's a familiar, domestic, comfortable act. The pineapple points to an interaction with someone she knew and trusted, inside her own home, during a block of time that, according to the official story, just doesn't exist.
So, if the pineapple points to a hidden timeline, this final piece of evidence reveals a hidden psychology. And for me, this might be the most telling paradox of all. It's the stark, jarring contrast between the violence of the crime and the profound, almost tender care shown to her body after she died.
Just listen to that description from John Ramsey himself.
It's an incredibly powerful image. A body wasn't just hidden or dumped, it was cared for. Wrapping a child up like a papoose, that's a protective, nurturing, almost parental gesture. So why on earth would a killer do something so gentle? Well, it turns out psychology actually has a name for this exact thing. It's called undoing. It's a defense mechanism where a person is so overwhelmed by guilt over something terrible they've done, they try to symbolically cancel it out by doing the opposite, in this case, an act of care. It's a desperate attempt to reverse the irreversible. And from a forensic standpoint, this is a huge red flag. This behavior, undoing, is seen overwhelmingly in cases where the killer has a deep emotional bond with the victim, especially a parent or a caregiver. A stranger doesn't feel that psychological pull to make their victim look peaceful or cared for. But a parent, they might be driven by this unbearable need to be a protector again, even when it's far, far too late. So, when you take these three paradoxes, the note, the pineapple, the blanket, and you put them all together, they stop looking like a bunch of random, confusing clues. Instead, they start to tell a single, coherent story. And that story is about panic. First, an unthinkable tragedy happens. Then, there's a frantic, clumsy attempt to cover it up with this elaborate kidnapping story, a story so rushed it forgets crucial details, like the pineapple. And finally, a subconscious act of remorse and care takes over, this desperate psychological need to undo the horror. And that's really the bottom line here. The evidence doesn't paint a picture of a calculated, cold-blooded intruder. It paints a picture of someone completely overwhelmed, making panicked decisions that are driven by pure terror, not by criminal strategy. It's a portrait of someone trying to build a new reality because their old one has just been completely shattered. And that leaves us with one last big thought. Beyond who did it, this case really forces us to ask a much deeper question, one about all of us. When we're faced with a reality that is simply too much to bear, what stories are we capable of telling ourselves and telling the world just to survive?